And she's also going to give us some great insights about kind of agile methodologies and how that plays out in the real world in terms of how work gets done in software development. So I'm grateful to have her back, and thanks for being here. And let's go ahead and welcome her.
Hello, thanks so much for having me. So as you said, I'm a product manager and work with lots of developers at my job, and so wanted to share a little bit about that. So first, this is me, and these are links. I'll share this at the end, and I'll actually share all of the slides too. But anyways, this is this, and I would also love your feedback if you have time after this. So just anything I can do better to improve this for like future talks. So a little bit about my career and how I got to being a product manager. And someone just asked this, I was an English major in college and actually went into publishing in New York after college, but ended up doing a lot of project management in that, building websites and apps and things for Penguin Books. And then moved back to the Seattle area and started a local startup called Avo, which I'll tell you a bit about. And from there, I was in marketing, content strategy, working on consumer-facing content, moved into product strategy, so working with designers and developers to actually design and build new experiences for our users. And then from that, moved into product management. So people get into product management in lots of ways, including software engineering. So this was my particular path, but lots of people get there in lots of ways, so you should ask them about it. And right now, I actually left Avo this summer and have just been doing some job hunting and enjoying summertime. So I'm happy to talk about interviews and any of that sort of stuff if you want as well. And on that note, I would highly recommend this book. If you are considering what do you want to do with your life or the different options ahead of you right now, this is great. It teaches you how to use the design process to design your life. It's something that'll be meaningful to you. And basically the takeaways are, there's tons of options, there's no wrong choices, and you just need to try out different things. So check that one out. So today, why I'm here, I want to share with you, so at Avo, I worked with Ada developers and CodeFellow developers, including some in the audience here. And as I was talking to them about things that they didn't know before they started working or things they wish they knew sooner, I thought, oh, I could help with that. So that's why I'm here. I want to share some concrete examples from like our real day-to-day work of building things. And then also I've been thinking about like what makes great developer teammates beyond just your technical skills, and I just wanted to share some tips that we learned and behaviors of really like successful developer teammates. And most importantly, this is N of one. Like this is just my opinion. I think it's so important to ask tons of different people what they think because it's different at every company, for every role, and people just have different opinions. So just gather as many opinions as you can and then formulate your own opinions about this stuff. So first concrete example area to dig into is how my Agile team worked at Avo. And a quick background, so Avo is a tech company. It's a two-sided marketplace connecting consumers with attorneys, and our mission was to get people the legal help they deserve. So connect you with information and attorneys that can help you. This was my team. Lots of folks in lots of different disciplines. So the teammate roles on here, product manager, so there were a couple of us, and our job was to set and drive the strategy based on user goals and business goals and the fastest way to deliver value, and then help the team get there and deliver that value. We had UX people, user experience, so for us that meant an interaction designer and then a content strategist. And they're really just thinking about how the design can achieve the user goals and the business goals. Then we had QA folks, quality assurance. They really, and this is super different everywhere as I've been learning in the interview process, so definitely ask about testing philosophy with people you're talking to. But so for us, they were sort of our first and last line of defense with our product to our users, and they would test new features that we were shipping, but also if any bugs came in, they were triaging those, helping to reproduce them, helping us set priority based on the impact of those bugs. We also, of course, had engineers. I use the phrases engineers and developers interchangeably. I don't know if you all have a preference, but that's what we said there. And their jobs were to deliver business value via being a software engineer. And we had data engineers, front-end engineers, full-stack engineers on our team. And then lastly, a business analyst whose job was to use data to find problems to solve or to communicate the impact of the work that we were doing. And also shout out any questions throughout, but I'll also pause for questions a few times. So this is a great video of just like how do Agile teams work. This is linked, and again, I'll share out the slides, but it sort of talks about the whole process, and it's a really good overview. Even though it's talking about product ownership, I really think this encapsulates what the whole teams do. And so why Agile? And first of all, Agile means different things everywhere. There's no like real definition of it, despite what some people might say about that. But really like the goal behind it is to just deliver value as quickly as possible. And the Agile approach, this is taken from the manifesto and the principles. It's really about being iterative and adaptive to new information that you're learning. The approach really values communication and feedback, like ongoing, constant. And the goal is working valuable software for people over like documentation or long times or anything like that, and just like get it out there quickly. So those are linked also, but definitely recommend watching that video to just get a picture of like the full system. And for us, here's our like concrete example of what that played out like. So we worked in 2-week sprint cycles. So every 2 weeks was sort of like a new rhythm for us with a new set of work we were committed to. And throughout that, there were these different things. So I'm going to go through a few of them here. But the first one, so we would do backlog grooming. And this is really, actually, let's back up real quick. Okay, so this picture here is basically just showing that there's like ideas coming from stakeholders, whether that's your users or the business. There's lots of ideas with lots of different impact amounts. Some might be really impactful, make a lot of money, or solve a lot of problems. Some might be smaller. They all kind of come into the team's backlog, but there's not enough like room and work to do all of this work, and really there's endless problems out there to solve, but you need to like figure out what are the most important ones. So you're saying no to a lot of things, and as a product manager, that's a lot of my job, is just saying no to people. But some of the work gets through, it comes into your backlog, you sort of groom it is the word we use, but figure out all the open questions about it, answer those, make sure you really understand what the work is before you pick it up. And then this little green circle over here is the team actually doing the work. It talks about developers mostly on this, but we had like our UX people, all the cross-functional folks in that. And then there's the output of the team. So what are you delivering? What work is coming out? And again, we'll go into some specific examples. And that's going back out into the world or to the stakeholders, and you're constantly getting feedback, iterating new work coming in, all that sort of stuff. So for us, again, so every week we would do backlog grooming, and the goal was just get shared understanding about the problems that were coming down the line that we might be working on. And we would just review new requests that were coming in. Maybe the sales team wanted a new tool, or attorneys for us, so those were our users at Avo. Maybe they said they wanted something fixed or something different. So you're reviewing all that, you're asking open questions, and discussing different options to go about it, and then estimating how much work this is gonna take. At the beginning, so that's ongoing, sort of you're just always doing that. Then sprint planning was to kick off this 2-week sprint. So again, shared understanding is a big goal with this. So we're sort of saying like, okay, for these next 2 weeks, here are the main focuses for the team. Here's what we're gonna be working on. So we talk about the goals, and then we would also be then breaking up the work into small chunks so that actually like developers and designers could actually dig in and start doing that work. And we're committing to the work to deliver, not necessarily any specific dates, and then we're like kicking off and go time, start doing the work. So then throughout the 2-week sprint and just ongoing, we'd have daily stand-up. And this is the goal here, is just to communicate with the team about what's going on and surface any blockers or anything that's slowing you down. And our little framework was, yesterday I did this, today I'm working on this, I have no blockers, or yes, I'm blocked, or I'm slowed down on something. And then also parking lot, as we called it, for just like, let's save some discussion. Like, I have some questions like I want to talk about with the team. But the goal is this is really quick and lightweight, but just like constant communication with the team. And then at the end of the 2-week sprint, which also happened to fall, so every other Tuesday it was like, we're wrapping up the last sprint and starting the next sprint. But we would demo our work to the whole company and to all the other teams, and we're trying to share like what have we produced that produced business value, and also just any lessons we've learned. Like failed tests were a really great thing to demo, and all the learnings from that. And the framework, which I'm going to talk about a little later, that we used was what was the problem I was trying to solve, what were the actions that we took to solve it, and then what's the result of that. That's a nice framework for talking about your work at any time. And then we would also be doing a retrospective at this time and like thinking back on the past sprint and what did we want to keep, what went well and we want to keep doing, what didn't go well and we want to stop doing, any ideas that we want to try out for this next sprint, and also just like high fives and props to our teammates. So these are sort of like Agile ceremonies is like a word used to describe these things, but they're pretty just simple, straightforward. Every team does them in very different ways. Some people do these remotely, some people do them in person, but this is another good thing to ask other people about and other companies about, like how do you work? What are your different like milestones or activities that the teams do? Any questions about any of that? Okay. Okay, so next concrete example area is what do product managers do? Because you might find yourself working with one shortly. These are a bunch of different titles and words you might hear out there. And the main takeaway is that words mean different things at different places, so just ask people what they do and like what their role is like. So product manager is one you hear a lot. Typically this means that you own the end-to-end user experience of the product experience, and you're responsible for delivering that strategy, but also like actually the impact and the value. Product owner is another word. It's like the Agile lingo term, but similar thing. Project manager, you might hear a lot too. This also totally just depends on places, but at Avo, it meant that they manage defined projects, but they're not necessarily setting the strategy. So usually you're not responsible for that strategy. And same thing with program manager. Again, this was often used in like marketing or sales orgs for us, but this is definitely a thing at lots of tech companies. And again, for us, it meant that you weren't in charge of the strategy, you were in charge of just managing the program and keeping things running. But again, it means different things at different places. Any questions about that? Yep.
So how do these different positions like rank in the overall hierarchy?
Yeah, so again, it totally depends. So I know some places, and there's different levels of them. There could be like senior program managers. There's definitely lots of people with much more experience than I do that have like project manager or program manager title, but at Avo, product manager was like the hierarchy, or was the top one, the most responsibility. Yeah, good question. Yep.
So would a product manager or product owner be responsible for strategy?
Yep, oftentimes, yeah. And sometimes you'll have like a VP of product or group product managers above you also helping with that, but really as the product manager in like the traditional sense or how we used it at Avo, it was, yeah, you're responsible for the strategy, but also making the things happen too. Mm-hmm. Good question.
When you say like orgs and stuff, like how big is like a team, like project manager to, or product manager to project manager to like the team? Like,
Yeah,
how
good
big is
question.
that?
So we didn't have any project managers on our team, so we just had product managers. But in really big tech companies, for example, you might see all of these roles and different things. So yeah, but yeah, you might not have all of these, but sometimes you might have product managers and then project managers helping execute the project. Yeah, that's a weird answer, but did that help? Did that answer your question?
It varies.
Yeah, it totally varies. It just ask people, how does it work at your org? What are the titles? What do they do? Yeah, good question. Okay, so for product managers, just like a quick overview of the role and the skill set. So it's really a mixture of these different areas, and at different places you might need one, or you might need to index higher on one of these or the other. So really there's always gonna be some element of leadership. You're somewhat managing the team, but no one reports to you. So you're kind of lead without authority is the phrase people often say. You're also doing a ton of communication. So communicating within the team, also with your internal stakeholders, and also externally to your users or your customers, or maybe just business partners, like if you use third-party tools to get anything done. So lots of different types of communication. Also product strategy, knowing about like product vision, product intuition, like defining the long-term product strategy is often an area. Business strategy, same thing, like how are we gonna make money on this thing? How are we gonna market this thing, what we're building? And then oftentimes you need to be really analytical, so maybe there's a lot of like data analysis that you use to help inform your priorities or set strategy. And also, depending on the role, it might need to be really technical. So, so for all of these, and this is why lots of different people get into product management, sometimes it's really helpful to have the technical skills, and so there's lots of software engineers that become product managers. Sometimes there's BI analysts or people with MBAs that become product managers in spaces where you need to be really analytical and digging into the data and a lot of the business strategy side. I come obviously from the UX background, so I index really heavily on the product strategy side and the communication side. But basically everybody has a different flavor of this, and different roles require different areas or different levels of that focus. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then also just making sure your team is working efficiently and that they're happy. It's like another big thing in the job. Okay, so these are things your product manager might say to you as you're working. So they'll often say, our goal is to deliver user value as quickly as possible. Like that's something I repeated a lot. What's the impact of this problem or idea? So like there's gonna be endless ideas and problems in your backlog, but what actually is the impact for users, for the business, to developers perhaps, if we're talking about tech debt, stuff like that? Is there benefit to doing this work now versus later? Sometimes the problem will get much worse over time, or actually it won't actually be that big of a problem over time, or it'll just basically stay the same. And then they'll ask, what are your opinions about this? What are all of our different options? Do you have a recommendation based on the options? And under that, there's sort of like pros and cons to everything. There's never a right answer. There's just trade-offs to make, maybe with speed or quality, or like how expensive it's going to be. So we might want something done really well, but it needs to be really fast, so we have to throw all of our developers at it for a while. Or actually, this can be really cheap and quick, so we're going to just put one person on it and have them do like not a really like thorough job sort of thing. So there's just always trade-offs that you make. Is there a simpler way to do this? Is there a faster way to do this? Are you blocked or slowed down? That was something I was trying to constantly ask my developers. And then if any stakeholders were ever like randomizing the team or coming in with like side pet projects or things, telling your developers to make that person talk to me instead so that you can focus and do your work. Any questions about any of these?
What do you mean by stakeholder?
Yeah, good question. So stakeholders are like the people who care about the work you're doing. So that could be like your marketing team, perhaps, your sales team, your business leadership team, or they can be, we talk about external stakeholders like your users, your customers, all sorts of different people, but people who care about your work, basically. Mm-hmm. And who maybe put in the request for the work, too. Okay. Any other questions on that piece? All right. Okay, so now this is really opinion-based, but behaviors of successful developer teammates at Avo, and some examples of tips and tricks and things like that. Okay, so I totally made this up. Again, one opinion, but really there's, so again, goal is always delivering value. That's what we're all here to do. And there's that foundation of like technical skills, but just mostly I care about like curiosity and a growth mindset. Like anybody can learn anything. Like you can all learn all the things you want to learn, and it's most important that your developers are like curious and believe that they can learn and keep trying and all that sort of stuff. So there's that sort of foundation. Like yes, that's your job. But then also this sort of like communication aspect with both pictures and words, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then this is also it's important, and it's like I don't expect my developers to have this like innately off the like right out when they're starting on the team, but getting a sense of like your users and your business problems and strategy around that sort of stuff is just helps you do your job better and helps you make better decisions. So first in the communication area, so pictures are super helpful. These are examples here of like whiteboarding sessions we did, and then we made this diagram based on one of those, and it just helps like communicate and give you like a sense of the picture, of the full picture of things you're working on. And some benefits, it helps you explore options often, just like jot down a bunch of options on the board, or it can just confirm your shared understanding. So I worked on one project where I definitely was not quite understanding the full thing until we did this big whiteboarding session, and then we all got on the same page about like, what does this overall architecture look like? Where are the risks? Where are the potential failure points? All that sort of stuff. So it can just be good to say like, let me just make sure I understand you and draw out the picture. It's also really good to explain things to non-technical folks. So if you're trying to explain something about the API and the database and blah, 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 like it's really helpful for your UX people or your product managers to just draw a picture. That's super helpful. And it's a good way to do lightweight documentation. So at Avo, we didn't do a lot of like, we didn't write any product specs, we didn't do a ton of documenting, but like even just taking a picture and throwing that in the Slack channel or something like that can be what you need to keep moving forward sometimes. Any questions about that piece, pictures? Pretty self-explanatory. Okay, and then communicating with words. So these are just some tips. So this is a video. Has anybody seen Start With Why? Simon Sinek, yeah, TED Talk, yep. So that's the link to the TED Talk. But it's just good to think about, it helps you, or the piece that's most helpful is it talks about the parts of your brain that can make decisions and how it's really like the feelings, emotions parts of your brain. We use the part of our brain with language to justify our decisions, but really like all that decision making comes from a part of your brain that doesn't have language. And so, but that part really responds well to understand like the why and the mission and things like that. So anyways, it's interesting brain science stuff, but also really helps you with communication. So some tips with this. Think about and understand why people are asking you these things. So if your product manager is asking you something, make sure you understand like what problem they're trying to solve or what they're trying to get at, because that'll help you get better answers. Impact also, like thinking about when you're communicating to your teammates or just, anywhere with the company. And someone said this to me the other day, like, what do you want people to hear, not necessarily what you want to say? So really trying to think about the impact of your words versus just like saying the words, if that makes sense. And also on that note, being really concise. people are really busy, inboxes are full, Slack channels are blowing up, like just trying to be as concise as possible. Someone once said, like, what's the Us Weekly headline version of this? And like, I think that's a good way to think about this. Like, what's the takeaway? Always driving towards action too. So if someone asks you a question and you give a long answer with lots of different things, it's sort of like, okay, well, so what? What do you think I should do? So always trying to think about like, what's the next step? What's the action we're trying to drive towards with this communication? And then always like linking to breadcrumbs. Like you don't have to put all the information in your answer or the JIRA ticket or wherever you're writing this thing. You can just say like, and here's the link to learn more if you want to learn more. Any questions about that? So here's an example from one of my developers who is at Code Fellows. So this is an example of great written communication and why it was so good. So this was a back and forth on a JIRA ticket, basically. So I had a ticket with some work that we needed to have done, and I asked her to estimate how much work this was. So what was so good about this? So first, she was really concise. She answered my question. This looks about 1 to 2 points of work, and points are really subjective, but we had a shared understanding on the team about how much work that meant. Then she provided helpful context. So she reminded me that we did this once before, so like that's great to know. Now I know as a PM, like at least it's a known amount of work and we like know the process to do it. And she also shared the code and the approach for her future dev teammates. So like, no, we can't read minds, so putting that information in the ticket is really helpful. Saves them some time. And then she also gave multiple options and her recommendation about which way to go forward. She also tried to get at that why, so she asked me some clarifying questions about the work to understand a little bit more. And then when I answered those, then she re-estimated. The work based on my answer. Again, driving towards action. So now I had everything I needed to know to either prioritize this in the next sprint or deprioritize it and say we're not going to take this work on. Any questions about that? Okay. Another helpful thing with communication, again, as I mentioned earlier, is this PAR framework. So problem, action, result. This is really good for job interviews also to help people follow along the story and to really describe the impact of why your work matters. So we use this at demos, but yeah, again, problem you're trying to solve, what did you do to solve it, and what was the result, what did you learn, what was the impact? Okay, and then 2 other things I'm gonna show you in a second. But these are around like team communication and things that helped us. So the first thing, I wish I knew this sooner, but basically this is a picture that I like printed out and hung up around our area. But it's basically describing the process of getting to good decisions as a team. And I hope everyone's okay. But so first there's some sort of new topic like introduced to the group, maybe a new idea or a new problem to solve or something like that. Then you need to go in this like divergent thinking where you like explore really wide. Like first you're gonna get some familiar opinions, then if you go wide enough, you'll get some like new ideas, diverse ideas, all that sort of stuff into the mix. Then there's gonna be this like yucky part in the middle where you're like sort of like struggling around and you're trying to figure out what's the right way forward, and this like feels uncomfortable. And we definitely felt this when we were forming as a team and deciding how we wanted to work and things. But really that struggle part is super important to then as you're converging on what's the best way forward, there's like a lot of magic that happens in the struggle. So that's all to say that if you're with a team, you're like arguing about different options or things like that, just know that that is like a really healthy part of the process and that like you will move through that part, but it is an important step. So hopefully that helps if you're ever in that situation. Yeah?
Is it like the struggle part, like what language we should do or what frame, like what way we should, algorithm we should put in there? Is that?
Oh, this was more like group dynamics and decision making sort of thing. It can also be like when you're designing a product or working out technical approaches to things, like you might have a lot of different options and it might feel like you're not moving forward, but knowing that, I guess the takeaway is like, stay in that space a little bit longer than feels comfortable because you'll actually get to like a better long-term outcome if you like go through all the options and poke holes and explore different ways of doing it, if that makes sense. Anybody else? Okay. And then another thing, again, I'll share these slides, but these were templates that we used for bugs and for feature enhancements and for tech debt, just to help answer all the questions we needed before we actually picked up some work, and this ended up just saving the team a lot of time. So it was a good way to just make sure that we had all the information we needed before we started work and really thought through the steps. So we had one for bugs, which included what the steps needed to reproduce the bug, so what was going on, the expected behavior, the actual behavior, so what was actually happening instead of what we expected, And then was this isolated or widespread? Because that helps us know, like, whoa, if this is happening to everybody, it's a really big problem, versus if it's happening to one person, maybe they're just not doing something right on their end. And then what's the impact to the users and to the business? Maybe the sales tool is broken, so salespeople can't sell, and so that's impacting your revenue or something like that. But that helps us prioritize too. And then for new feature requests, so again, like maybe the marketing team wants us to build something new, or the sales team or someone like that. So this was a template we used for that. So what's the problem you're trying to solve or the goal you're trying to achieve, to make sure we really understood that why behind the work. What's the impact to the end users? What's the impact to the business? And is there a cost savings or benefit to doing this now versus later? Again, all helps prioritize. And tech debt template. This was really, tech debt can be like a big scary thing sometimes, like, oh gosh, this is really gnarly, we don't know how to go about it, so it feels overwhelming, or maybe you just don't know like exactly what's going on that we need to fix. And tech debt itself is just a loosey-goosey term that we use for just like ugly code or like things that are causing us problems based on how we did it in the past. But so this was we developed this just to try to like make it more manageable, to like chunk up the work into smaller bits that we could like actively take on and fix, instead of being overwhelmed by like, oh, well, that whole thing's a mess and I just never want to touch it again, sort of thing. So again, hopefully you can just take those and use those in your day-to-day work. Okay, any questions about any of that? We're gonna go in the next area here. Okay, so the next one is understanding your users and UX. And so these are just some tips. So on the right-hand side here are just some of my favorite resources about this stuff. So Designing for Real Life and this video are both about just thinking about users like real life scenarios, and people are often bringing a lot of complicated stuff to your, like in their personal history to your product, and just being really cognizant about that. Nielsen Norman is a great resource for, it's just a website with lots of articles in it. So if you're ever like, I wonder how to do navigation elements, like they've got examples about that. And they've got a ton of user research about like what's best in class things. So like I'm building a form, what's the best way to build a form? They'll have different design tips on that. And then this book, Hooked, is all about how to develop habit-forming products, so products that are really valuable and like keep users hooked on them and using them. And it's got a lot of interesting psychology and also like design tips, so that's an interesting one. And then just some different tips about wherever you end up. You can attend user research sessions and like actually watch users use your products, or just ask about the findings of those. Oftentimes you'll have like a research team doing that. Ask your UX teammates about the reasons behind the design. So if someone comes to you and says, oh, can we move that button over here? Like ask why, so that you understand the like sort of the design principles or the psychology principles behind it, so you can make better choices in the future and just brush up on your skills, like become more like unicorn-like, as people like to say. And then also just, yeah, check out these resources. Any questions about that? Okay. And then the third and last piece of that was just understanding your business. So again, this is, like I didn't do as much of this when I was a UX person as I wish I would have. And these are some of my favorite things that taught me more about this. And I definitely learned a lot more about this as I became a product manager. But so I would say, like, ask your product manager about this. Like, tell me about the business. Tell me about how do we make money? What are sort of our core actions? So, and by that I mean, like, what are the actions that we need users to take without which like our business wouldn't exist? So with social networks like Facebook or LinkedIn or things, if people didn't connect with one another, if you didn't friend each other up front, then this wouldn't have ever grown or wouldn't continue to exist. Whereas now, obviously, there's tons of features on Facebook and there's all sorts of things, but really it's that like connecting that was one of their core actions early on. Same thing on Pinterest, it's like pinning things, stuff like that. So just thinking about like what are the core actions that our product could not exist without, and also like how do we make money? Because that'll just give you a fuller context of like the work that you're doing and why it matters. And then if you ever have, like we used to have our chief financial officer would do these like finance readouts or like health of the business readouts. Those are good to go to. You might not understand all the words, like I certainly didn't, but it's just good to get a sense of like how are we performing? Are we hitting our goals? Are we not hitting our goals? And just sort of like keeping a pulse on that sort of stuff. And then again, I recommend the Lean Startup. Now, full disclosure, some of this is quite dry, but there are some really helpful nuggets in this. We read it as a team, and it was a helpful way to think about building a quick company, or building a company and valuable products like quickly. And then this video, highly recommend, is from someone at Facebook in the design team, and she talks about the framework of how they prioritize things, basically. So what's the people problem we're trying to solve? How do we know it's a real problem? What data do we have around it? And how will we know when we've solved it? So what does like measuring success look like? Any questions about that? Okay. final piece are just some quick case studies, some few little ones. So it's an example of small work that we did. So the problem to solve, our marketing team was putting on a conference for our attorneys, and they wanted to announce this on the website. So the action, so myself and our UX people decided where should this little advertisement go for our conference. Marketing gave us the asset, which was like the picture, and then developers built it with like an on and off switch to it, so we could wait until the day that they were announcing it. And then I was able to like flip it on later. And so we built it and shipped it, and I flipped it on, and then people then were able to like buy tickets to our conference. And so this is the example, this was the Jira ticket that we used, and this was the end result. So this was the attorney's homepage when they logged in, and now they saw this. And so that was like a small amount of work for our team. Okay, a medium-sized project. Or any questions about that? Okay, medium-sized. So for this one, the problem to solve was, so in Ava, we had a free Q&A forum where people could ask questions and get answers from attorneys. So when consumers would ask those free questions, they wanted a fast answer to those. But as an attorney who's going to be answering it, it was hard to add new Q&A subscriptions to different topics. So like sign up for immigration questions in Seattle, sort of thing. So it was hard to do that, which meant they weren't going to be notified. And so we needed to make it easier for them to subscribe to these. So our UX folks then went and talked to our customer support teams and our sales team to really understand like what were people complaining about, what were the problems here. Then the developer and the UX person worked together to design a new interaction to make this easier to sign up. And it was just based on like best-in-class models for like signing up with complex forms. And then the result, it was really easy to add subscriptions now, but actually we made it too easy and it was now hard to unsubscribe. And so then we had to iterate a little bit because people were getting all these emails about new questions, and we did some other fit and finish things. So there was like some different iterations of it, and so that like we iterated over a couple sprints. So these were all the Jira tickets that went into that one project. And this was the new example. So this actually, it was like progressive reveal, but this is the whole thing. So first you would choose what practice area, so business, immigration, stuff like that. Then you would choose where you want to answer questions, in what areas. If you chose a state, then it would ask you if you want to do the entire state or just specific counties, because a lot of law is county-based. And then you could select your counties and then add the subscription. So it made it a lot easier. And then also we had select all to unsubscribe, because that was not there at the beginning. And then they were having to go through like hundreds of pages and unsubscribe, so that was not good. Okay, any questions about that? All right, and so the last one is sort of an extra large project, which is really a cautionary tale, and I see my developer laughing because she knows which one this is. So the problem to solve was that as Ava, we wanted a new feature that had 3 features of an existing product that had like 20 features more. And so why we were doing that doesn't quite matter to the story, but anyways, that's what we were trying to do, this new 3-feature feature. So we took a route that had some theoretical future side benefits of this. Then we hit some surprises in the code and the approach. Then we under-resourced the team. It was like getting a really big project, but then other priorities were coming up, so we pulled people off of this project. And then we hit a bunch of more surprises, and we just kept going. We like slowly slogged over like months and months and months on this project. And really, we lost sight of the business value we were delivering, and we were really just into like the technical details of like moving through this project. And when we ultimately shipped this thing, we broke the website for like a couple hours, and that's not good. That's like thousands and thousands of people on the website, and we took it down for 2 hours. And then we did ship again successfully, and throughout all of this, we learned a ton of really valuable lessons. And to get to these lessons, we did a retro, so like we had lots of chocolate. Oh, yep.
It said that the pivots were not dramatic enough. Can you give
Oh,
a
yeah.
little bit more explanation on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So pivots, anybody familiar with the definition of pivots or what we mean when we say that? Just like choosing a new, so just like choosing a new path, or maybe saying like, you know what, this is actually no longer a priority. We're actually gonna pivot away from this. We're gonna like cancel this project and focus on a different project. And so in that book, The Lean Startup that I showed, they talk about all the different pivots you can make. So you might pivot to a new user base. So you might say, actually this product is good, but we didn't have the right users. Or you might say like, well, actually this project or this product, only one of the features is valuable. So we're actually gonna pivot and just focus on that one feature and make that the product. So there's different types of pivots. For us, our pivots could have been like a different technical approach to this, or just like a different priority, like we're not working on this anymore, sort of thing. So that's what I mean for that. Yeah, good question. And you can have those, people often talk about a pivot or persevere conversation, like do we need to change direction or do we persevere through this? And really, we were trying, and I'll talk about this in a second actually, we were trying to build that muscle of having those conversations more regularly, like at least every sprint. Good question. So we did this retrospective to get some learnings about this. So we talked about like the whole timeline of events here. And then this was a fun framework that worked well for this, was how confident were we to how apprehensive were we? And then on the other axis, about the technology or about the people. And really we came out like there was tons of great stuff going on with the people and the teammates and the communication and things. But it was really like all these technical surprises where we did not feel good about, or we did not feel confident in our understanding of the technology and all these different things, if that makes sense. And so these were our sort of like takeaways from this and our learnings that we then applied to all of our future projects. And we shared this out, one of the developers and I shared this out at our all company demo so that other teams could benefit from this. So these were, never lose sight of the user or business value that you're working on, like say it early and often, especially as a product manager, like what's the goal here? Build that habit of those pivot or persevere discussions. So if estimates are changing, if anything's changing, just asking like, is this still a priority? Is there any new information that would challenge our thinking on this or make us likely to do a different approach with this? If there are any changes of scope, if you get into a code base and you're like, whoa, this is behaving way differently than I thought this was going to, or, oh man, we didn't realize that whole other piece of this needed to happen, bring that information back to your team like right away so that you can talk about it and say, figure out if we should do that, if there's another option, all that sort of stuff. Shipping each sprint. So really at Ava we shipped daily, but at parts in this project, we didn't ship anything new for like a sprint sometimes, and that doesn't feel good for actually like getting new working features out in the world, but also just for morale. Like it feels slow, it doesn't feel good to like not be producing anything out into the world. And then, but we did learn mentoring was really great. We had Code Fellows developers on this, we had Ada developers on this project, and definitely our mentees like learned a lot in this process, and our mentors also learned a lot working on these projects together. We also learned to rotate teammates off of projects. So you might think like, well, that person has all the knowledge on it, so we have to keep them on, but that's not good for that person or for the team's shared understanding. It can lead to burnout or like blaming people for different choices, and also just you want to make sure like if that person's out sick or they get another job or something, you want to make sure that everybody sort of knows the different areas and has like some level of understanding of this. So it's good to rotate people. And then legacy code was really full of surprises for us. So some of these things hadn't been touched in years. The code wasn't behaving like we thought it should, all that sort of stuff. And so we came up with that tech deck template that I shared earlier, which was our goal was to make the refactoring some of that like a more easy, manageable thing to take on. Okay, and that's it. That's all I got. Questions in general, and I'm also happy to stick around. Yeah?
You said developers do not report to product
Mhm.
managers. Whom do they report to? And can you give more information about the team and their roles within the developer team?
Yep, definitely. So, yes. So developers at Ava, so this is another thing that's different everywhere, and I highly recommend asking people, like, how does management work at your company or with your team? So for us, we had managers that were not on the teams, and all of our developers reported into them. And those were developers themselves, but only focused on management. So that was our way of doing things. I think what is more common, as I've been talking to different companies, is to have the dev manager on the team itself. So as the developer, your manager would also be working with you on building these things, and they might take more of like an architecture role or a strategy role. They're also there to like mentor and coach you and manage you too. Yeah, good question. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about why is it important to rotate team member, and what might be the downside having, say, one team member who has like far more extensive knowledge on the subject than the rest of the group?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so rotation is good, yeah, for a few reasons. So it avoids burnout in a specific problem space. So you might just, if you're working on something for a while, you might just get bored or burnt out on it and you want to change a pace. It's also good to rotate just so that you get different ideas and approaches coming into the same problem space or the same product. So a new developer coming onto it might just be thinking about things differently and bring a different perspective and opinion. So that's really good. And then also just for like the knowledge transfer and making sure that like more people than just you never want these like single point of failure people where if they leave, we would always say like if they won the lottery and didn't come back tomorrow, like what would any of us know how to like ship this project or things like that. And so just getting that shared understanding. And you know, people might say like, well, it'll slow us down, and that is something. Like there will be ramp up time, but in general, over the long, if you take the long view of it, you will be much faster long term, and you'll probably get better ideas and better approaches because you'll have different perspectives on the project. Yeah, good question. Anybody else? Yeah.
You said you went from UI UX to product manager.
Mm-hmm.
So were there any skills that you had to acquire beforehand before you slipped into that role, or was it a basically you went from UI to UX straight into product manager, and you kind of stretch yourself?
Yeah. So I was fortunate, so our company was like a small startup, and I was able to move roles like pretty quickly there as I was learning more things. So so I was doing UX content strategy, so working on like the design and really focusing on the words of the product, but like designing our new e-commerce store, designing new user flows, things like that. But I was doing a lot of communication across teams, so I was starting to do some of the things that product managers were doing, and I was also doing a lot of project management and like making sure things were happening, working closely with developers and just different folks on the team. So my boss actually asked me to move into product management. So that was very fortunate for me, and that doesn't happen everywhere, but I will say, like, then I definitely learned a ton more. Like, so before, as a UX person, I was working day to day with developers to like build and ship things. However, I have learned so much more about like in the technical side of things since becoming a product manager. So that's definitely one area. And then the other one is just more of that like business and strategy area. So I did have to not only just how do the products work, are they working well, are they really usable, but like, and how do we make money off of this? And like, what are the choices we need to make to drive more revenue, because we are a for-profit business that needs to keep the lights on, sort of thing. Yeah, and I would say like tons of developers move into product management. It's really like you'll gain and learn the skills you need to learn, but if it's interesting to you, like you definitely do that too. Yeah.
When like you're a UX designer, like were you just like drawing out sketches of like maybe the e-commerce should look this way? What was that whole experience
Great
like?
question. Yeah, so UX really, you're looking at like the qualitative and quantitative data to like understand the problem space. So qualitative might be users are telling us they really want this thing, or users are telling us, like let's use the example of attorneys. So for attorneys, for them, they are trying to get new clients to like pay their bills. And as part of that, they have to do a lot of marketing, and so that takes a lot of time and energy for them. Ava was one piece of their marketing. So we need to make sure that it's really easy to use and takes like not very much time to fill out your profile or answer questions, things like that, because they're super busy. They're trying to like be lawyers, but they also have to do this marketing of their small business. But then we might think, another thing that we were hearing was it was really hard for them to see what new clients were coming from Avo. So then we might design like, okay, we maybe need to improve how their contact information, like all the different phone calls or messages they're getting, things like that. So really, you're using data to identify pain points, and then you're trying to solve them with like pictures or words or workflows or products or things. That's a weird definition, but did that help answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm happy to talk about UX at any point too. Anybody else? Yeah.
You mentioned 3 different templates that you had developed, one for bugs, one for new features, and one for technical debt. Were there any other templates that you wish you had designed before big problems had happened, or were those 3 big ones?
Yeah, so those were the 3 types of work we used in our like Jira project. So those worked for us. I can't think off the top of my head any other ones that would be helpful, but definitely we were always just working on frameworks in general, like the PAR framework, the problem action result, that was another one we worked on. But yeah, it's really like all that sort of stuff depends on just what the team needs and what like problems the team is trying to solve. For us, we were having a problem with lots of requests coming in that were really like disorganized and not complete, and it was confusing, so that's how we ended up with those. Yeah, good question though. Anybody else? Okay, I'll hang out here afterwards if anybody has questions, but thank you all. No problem. Yeah, they do. Yeah, and actually one of my developers is here now who works with them, so yeah, definitely. And she was Code Fellows. Yeah, that's Yana right there. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, no problem. Yes, of course. How are you? What's your name? Nice to meet you, Darren.